It's time for our church and community news.
That's right, it sure is. It's time for another season, a new season of Unfiltered. And this time, we're taking it back to the church and the community. I want you to join me every Friday evening at 8 p.m. and every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. for Unfiltered Church and Community Conversations on the BDE Music Network on the TuneIn app. Simply download the TuneIn app and search for BDE Music Network and join in for the conversation. That's every Friday night, 8 p.m., and every Sunday morning, 8 a.m. It's time.
And what had happened was Beyonce released her newest album, Renaissance. It was long awaited, and people were in anticipation of it. So, because people were in anticipation of it, when it released, it was thoroughly criticized. It was criticized on a music level, with the fact that she's utilizing the community of house music. And a lot of people were critical of her for stepping into that genre just to kind of sample it and play around with it. And they were heavily criticizing her usage of that. Then you had the church community that were up in arms because she made a song, she titled it Church Girls, and then she sampled from a legendary gospel group, the Clark Sisters. And with social media being involved with things, it takes things to the next level because we are so connected. And so people were easily able to antagonize comments from people by going to their social media platforms. And so the more people, artists, in the gospel community begin to speak out, you know, I didn't really say anything about this because I was just on both ends, feeling and understanding. I was feeling an understanding of Beyonce being a creative person and wanting to use all parts of her in her artistic expression. And it's hard to leave parts of you behind, even if you don't represent that part of you fully and wholly in your daily life. I have a very religious background, like growing up, but that doesn't mean that that's always displayed in my everyday life and in my everyday expression of myself. I don't always show up under that representation. And so she is on a very different end of the spectrum that not a lot of people sit at. And so it's very easy to criticize it. It's very easy to find fault in it because it varies so much from the norm. And so I understood that part of it. On the Because what ended up happening, like I said, was several people began to speak out. Several uh influential people within each of those communities. That house music community, they were very critical. you know um the R&B community, just different musical genres. If you just look across the internet, you'll see where a lot of different people that kind of sit in particular genres were discussing, the blending of the different sounds and things that were coming together, the usage of different artists, the collaborations and things like that was just heavily discussed on that side. But then there was another side to the discussion that began to outweigh those other discussions, and that was the use of gospel music on the song Church Girl, where she's having explicit lyrics. She's talking about twerking, and so it was just an uproar. and there was a pastor, a bishop in the Kojic church, Bishop Wooten, that began to speak out and rebuke her, rebuke the usage of collaborating and combining these two communities in agreement. And the thing about collaborating and coming together in partnership, you do form a relationship, and you do say, in a way, by us coming together, that we're in agreement with each other. And it was always shocking to me to grow up and discover that people that had been on the same song together had recorded the music in two different locations, and they've never even met. They just on the track together, and to find out people are in music groups and they're out, and then you discover they don't even like each other and they're always arguing, and it's so much toxicity. It's just like very surprising to finally get a glimpse behind the veil that's been in place for so long, that left people assuming things. And so now to discover that these collaborations go on, because what ended up happening was one of the Clark sisters spoke out and said, leave Beyonce alone. Because that was an agreement that they had come to. She can't sample their music without their permission and approval. And I've heard another collaboration of theirs before that I really like, that's on Jay-Z's 444 album. And it's like, she's like, hi y'all. Hi. I like that song. I like that. When I first heard it, I was like, I could hear their influence. And it took it to another level spiritually. And he was reflecting on, his religious beliefs and just his beliefs in life and the conclusions that he's come to going into another level of manhood. And so it made sense that he kind of had this religious experience. So it made sense for him to use religious undertones in his music. And with Beyonce on the vocals, and he's talking about family, it kind of all went together. So there's a lot of reasons why that was not criticized in that way, the way this song is being criticized, because it seems like combining good and bad, good and evil together, and that they're coming in agreement with each other. And so I understand Bishop Wooten coming out and rebuking that, because that is the duty of the church world, to rebuke words that go out, because they have an understanding, or they should. See, what happens sometimes is that people do things, they're trying to mimic what should be done, but they're doing it in the wrong spirit. So it's made to look confusing. It's not accepted. It's rejected. It's rebelled against the word, even if it's in truth. Because if it's out of judgment, the parameters by which you're judging this situation on takes weight, and it can take weight over the truth. That's why Christians have to continue to stay in examination of the words that they say towards God's people, and not take it lightly and think that they can ride out in right. You cannot ride out in right. You have to still stay humble, even in right. And so in this particular situation, it just, I feel like, yes, it should have been said somewhere by the Christian community that this we are not in agreement on. That song stood for this, this, and this. Adding this, coming into agreement with this, now brings in things that can be a word that can be harmful to God's people. And we see that, even if God's people don't see that. So we come against this agreement. We come against this word that is going out over the land. And I feel like it's important that the Christian community speak up when there are things that happen like that, because it gives other Christians that may have been melodically attached, because that is the power of music. The melody, the beats of it, those things open portals within us, within our hearts, our minds, our souls, our spirit. It opens portals. And those portals, when those words get into you, they form attachments. And so that becomes the danger. But see, my thing is this: I have to be a little critical of the church community, because these are the same things, tools by which they use to sometimes entrap Christians into religious situations. And so therefore, I feel like there is a gap of them really speaking on the powers and the dangers of music, because they use it too. And so therefore, they're not going to say too much. Sometimes they are aware of things, but they're not going to say too much because they're in usage of it as well. That's how this collaboration was even able to happen. That's how these things are. There is some bridge formed, some agreement formed that allows people to say it is okay for us to cross over to this other side and behave this way and act this way and look this way. This agreement that it is okay for this to happen becomes a bridge for people to wholeheartedly trusting the years and dedication of the Clark sisters to gospel music. And now they may have not even known of Beyonce, or, been all of that, saying, hey, I'm not supposed to listen to that. But then they see, oh, they had a collaboration. And I'm out here, saying no to the Clark sisters. Saying no to Beyonce. And here they are working together, so maybe it's okay. And that sometimes is what it takes for people, because of the place that people that are religious sit in. They sit in a inactive position in their lives of taking full ownership of their lives. They allow people to just be those big guiding forces, pastors and different people with titles in their lives. And, instead of looking at things and learning to hear from God themselves. And so when these spiritual leaders and people we look up to that have gifts and talents begin to showcase what they're doing in their life, we can begin to let down our defenses and say, okay, well, I guess it's okay. I guess that is okay, but you have to remember to let every man examine themselves and constantly just be an examination of yourself, because it's been plenty times that I've learned the very absolute hard way that, okay, I seen my friend do it and she getting along real well, but I have yet to enjoy the fruits of what she did. The fruits of what I did not look the same. And so that taught me very early on that it don't matter what other people do. It does not matter that they're able to do those things. That is no reason for me to let down my guard, to take my armor off, to say that it is okay. It's what is meant for me to do is to sit back and critically evaluate that and say, I can understand why they would do that and they would form that collaboration. I can see how Beyonce's camp probably came in and, they probably discussed the benefits of that collaboration and really sauced it up, and it comes with payment and residual and, a nice financial blessing, that puts it in a different category, because when we're presented with certain opportunities, that we go to considering things that we never would consider. And so I understand that portion of it, to say, hey, that's why they did it, because it was a benefit. And it is really just that simple, because, as much as it's been said, it's not about silver and gold and, you know, throw away everything, take up your cross, you know, all of these things have been preached to me and at me my entire life. Meanwhile, in between time, behind the scenes, it's been a lot of exchanging of silver and gold for these words to even be spoken. And so I have to critically look at that and say, what does that say? What does that say about the motives and the weight and the measure behind the words that's been spoken to me and over me? How much weight should I give that in my life when I now know all of these things? Now I have to give it different weight in my life. Now I have to see that this collaboration, no one came out in an interview to really say, oh, this deep spiritual meaning behind this collaboration and what this did and da 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 da. No one's really coming out to clarify. So that leaves me to sit back and utilize my own knowledge of, well, let me think. I collaborate with a lot of people. I collaborate with people. And when I collaborate with people, I am going into a relationship with them. It's a lot of communication that have to happen. I have to make sure that we have an understanding. We're all on the same page, you know, for that time of working together of that project. We have a relationship. And when people see me going into collaboration with people, if they trust me, they are now open to trusting that person. And so, and it worked both ways, because if they don't trust me, when they see me working with somebody else, they'll say, I don't know, they working with such and such, so now I don't know. So, it can go both ways, but either way it go, they see it as, an agreement of that person, an agreement of their behavior, an agreement of their character, an agreement of what they're doing, of what they're coming together to do. So a lot of people were rejectful of that collaboration because it seemed like an agreement to the things she was talking about, when that is not what's been preached for decades. That is not what they have sung about. That's not the word by which they have produced that original song from. Now it seems like it bridges into something else that is more sinister, that is darker, that is demeaning more for women, that puts them in a poor light, that, goes against what the original content stood for. And you do have to think about that. Even in your everyday life, I think about the clothes that I wear, the brands, and just things like that. Those things are beginning to mean something more to me than they ever did. Partnerships and working with different people, all of those things begin to mean more, because you do have to investigate into that person, and you have to investigate in more than just how they appear on the surface. You have to look into their relationships and what other things have they produced. Has it lined up to this and that, and critically evaluate it. And so, I was tight. I was feeling a certain type of way when he first came out, because Sometimes I have recognized that a lot of black male preachers have a lot of energy for black women. They just have a lot of energy for them to just be discuss them in a way that they would not do anyone else. And so when that happens, no matter how much truth is in it, it will be rejected or rebelled against because of the way that you come forth with it. And in the past, that the way a woman felt about what you were saying to them or about them did not really hold a lot of weight. It's like it's the truth. That goes for when a black man was talking to a black woman or a black woman is talking to another black woman. When she's rolling her neck and snapping her fingers and knowing that she's sitting in the truth, she's not worried about how she's presenting that truth. But we should be. We should be in evaluation of how we're distributing truth to each other. Because what happens is that we have begun to all be able to take notice that when we address other people, we don't have that same energy. But when we address each other, we take on this extra energy. And it just shows. And then it can't, no matter what truth you're trying to tell, it's not going to be accepted in the way that it could be if it was delivered with more respect, with more grace, with more understanding. But, because religious people feel righteous and feel I have the truth, I'm armed with the truth, so I don't have to come at you with respect. I don't have to humble myself and, just say, hey, if you're willing, I'm willing to discuss this and talk about this and work through this or whatever, and seek towards forgiveness and towards better, because you're armed with what you feel is right. Then you just feel like you ain't kissed that ground yet. You ain't kissed that. You ain't went down low enough yet for me to even bat an eye. So that keeps people in a position of feeling like, well, I'm not going to do that for you. This is not about you first. It's about being right with God. And if you had a respect for that, you would show grace and allow that person to get right and make things right instead of feeling so full up with righteousness and pridefulness that you can't even allow someone to get right and get things right and work through whatever they're going through. Peace.